Welcome to the Animal Free Labcast, everybody. I am back again with Dr. Gemma Davis. Hey, Gemma, how are you?
Hi, Carla. I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
Wonderful.
Good.
You're getting a bit of a cold, aren't you? Bless you.
I am a little bit, so please do excuse me being a little bit croaky today.
So, Gemma, what have we got coming up today?
We've got quite a busy one today, as we've just had the annual stats of animal use in British labs released by the Home Office. So I'll be talking about those in a minute. But also, as October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we're also going to be joined by Dr. Jenny Ashworth from the University of Nottingham, who is developing new animal-free materials to study patient-derived breast cancer samples. So very interesting work.
And we're both in pink, so we're ready to go with that.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't even think about that, but yeah.
No. Well, before we start with that, Gemma, tell us about the results of last week's poll question.
Yeah, so the question was, to avoid duplicate animal tests, should researchers be incentivised to share their results with others? Yes or no?
Oh.
And
drum roll.
The answer was 100%. Everybody said yes.
It's a no-brainer.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be a really important thing to do. So hopefully that's going to be something that can potentially happen in future. We'll see.
Fingers crossed. Okay, well, before Jenny joins us, as Gemma said, we've got some breaking news as the 2024 Home Office annual statistics of animal use have just been released last Thursday. So on Thursday, the Home Office released these statistics. They're called officially the annual statistics on the scientific procedures carried out on living animals in Great Britain in 2024. So procedures to you and me is experiments.
Yeah.
So animal experiments. So it's all publicly available information. You can go onto the government's website if you want to, and you can download it all. And we also have loads of information on our website, so you can read about it in more detail. We are going to be talking stats today because it's all about stats. So, you know, Gemma and I are aware this maybe can get a bit overwhelming. So we're just going to try and pick out some of the key ones for you. And then if you want to read about it, it's all on our website. The headline figure is that in 2024, 2.64 million procedures, experiments, so 2.64 million were carried out on living animals in British labs. That is horrendous and a pitiful 1.2% decrease compared to the previous year.
Yeah.
Pitiful because, I mean, in the context of the government saying it's working towards phasing out animal testing, well, we're not seeing much of that so far, are we?
No, exactly. And with a drop that small, you know, that really could just be, that's just what happened this year. You know, there is no kind of real driving force behind that that's made enough of a difference. So, yeah, we're not pleased with that,
absolutely. We're not pleased with it. No. So anyway, well, Gemma, pick out some of the key numbers for us then.
Yeah, sure. So just over half of those procedures, so the 2.64 million procedures, about 54% of those were actual experiments that used animals. And the remainder were used in the creation or breeding of genetically altered animals, but they weren't used in experiments. So that's a really important point to kind of make, because you might think, oh, well, at least they didn't get used in experiments. But those animals will have gone through some sort of process to make them genetically modified. And they might have been born with painful, disfiguring mutations. They might have tumours, because, you know, quite often that's done to try and give these animals cancer. So, you know, just because they haven't been used specifically in an experiment doesn't mean that they're just, you know, happy, healthy mice. But even if they were, they're still living in this unnatural lab environment, and they are just killed when they're no longer needed. So if they weren't born with the right mutation, you know, lots of different reasons that they're not used, they are just killed. And that ended up being over 1 million mice just in 2024, plus other animals like rats, frogs, chickens and fish. So
and some of these animals, Gemma, I understand, is that they might not even be viable for life. So there really is, you know, because the genetic modification that's been made is so extreme that they're just born into immense suffering and, you know, don't survive. Some of them.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's really difficult, and it's important to make that point because, sometimes that kind of gets brushed off a little bit and people focus just on the ones used in experiments. But, those are animals as well, and it does matter. So,
yeah, it's an actually absolutely huge proportion of the animals
yeah,
that are being used,
Yeah, exactly. So moving on to the procedures that did use animals in experiments, which was over 1.4 million. Of those experiments, 1.1 million, sorry, this is a lot of numbers, 1.1 million experiments were carried out for basic or applied research reasons. So they had no regulatory or legal requirement to use animals in either of these areas, but still 1.1 million experiments were carried out using animals.
So that's a really important point to make, isn't it? Because, time and again, people assume that animals are being used because there's a legal requirement, because they have to be used. But actually, in 1.1 million experiments, there's no legal requirement. No. People are choosing to use them. There's a choice that's being made.
Yep. That's it. So this is why we keep saying how important it is to educate people about these alternative methods for doing this kind of work, because people are making the choice, and then the license applications that they're putting in to use animals are also being approved. There's this just kind of system where it just goes through with no checking. So
there's rubber stamping it.
Yeah. Exactly. So over 48,000 of those procedures were also reported to involve severe suffering. So these are the official classifications. It can be mild, moderate, severe, unclassified, but also non-recovery, where the animal doesn't actually wake up from anaesthesia. So, that's almost 50,000 procedures were severe, and that's just a 3.8% reduction compared to the previous year. So we're just not seeing enough progress.
No, and those classifications, that's not what me and you think is severe. That's what the government has termed as severe.
Yep,
this is This is the worst of the worst of the worst. So again, absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, and quite often when we look at the license applications that we talked about before in the non-technical summaries, some of the things that are classed as these kind of mild or moderate classifications, you sort of wonder if they are in the right bracket. They're quite unpleasant procedures. So
really heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is. So the next point to make is about the use of specially protected species. So these are animals that are given special protections by the law, by ASPA, and their use must be justified as to why another animal couldn't be used instead, but also, why they need to be used at all. So 16,147 experiments were carried out using these specially protected species, which are dogs, cats, horses, and monkeys. So just to kind of run through those numbers in more detail, 2,646 experiments used dogs in 2024. So that's a 30% decrease compared to the year before, 2023. But it used 1,651 actual dogs.
And that's because one dog will be used in more than one experiment. So that's why you're seeing a fewer number of dogs than experiments.
Exactly. Yeah. 82 experiments used cats. So that was actually a 30% increase compared to the year before. 11,483 procedures used horses. So that was a 0.6% increase on the year before. And 1,936 procedures used non-human primates or monkeys. And that's a 10.7% decrease. So that's the number of actual experiments or procedures. But what is a bit concerning is that when we look at the actual numbers of animals that are used in these experiments, we do see quite a large increase in the number of cats that have been used this year. So it's an increase from 9 cats in 2023 up to 35 in 2024.
That's a lot of cats, isn't it? 35 too many.
Exactly. Another thing that's quite upsetting from that section to know is that 99% of the macaques that are used in experiments in British labs have been imported from Africa or Asia. So that means that before they even got to the lab and, started having whatever experiment is being done on them, they would have had many, many hours of transportation and the additional stress and changes in environments to go through. So that's a really kind of difficult thing to think about.
Yeah, that's really upsetting.
Yeah, it is. So what else we've had through this year, which is a bit new compared to previous years, they've given us some extra insight into some of the specific types of tests that the animals are used in. So, for example, 250 procedures this year were reported as being the forced swim test. So if you kind of haven't heard about this one before, it's a very controversial and outdated test that dates back to the 1970s. And basically a small animal like a mouse or a rat is put into a container of water from which it can't escape. And the whole point of the test is to see how long it takes that mouse or rat to kind of basically give up and stop swimming. And it's meant to be a model to resemble human depression. And it's been used to test... It is to test antidepressant drugs to see if it can make that animal want to swim for longer, and it's kind of translated into an increased will to survive. But this has been heavily disputed for a long time due to both the ethics of that experiment and also the lack of scientific evidence backing it up as its usefulness of modelling depression in humans. But clearly, 250 instances of it in 2024, it's still being used in British labs today.
That 250 as well. I mean, it's quite staggering. That's very close to one procedure being carried out per working day in the UK last year. I mean, that's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We do know that this is one of the ones the government is looking at banning as part of its new strategy. So fingers crossed on that, because this is so outdated and just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. I mean, it's all horrendous, but this is particularly nasty. So hopefully we'll be able to come back and let you know, okay, that's going to be banned.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just one example. So, yeah. So
well, tell us some good news, Gemma. Is there any?
Well, it does, it all does seem like doom and gloom. And when you put these numbers on things, it does bring it to your attention to try and even imagine how many animals that is. But, we were really pleased that Isabel, our public affairs director, had the opportunity to go on LBC radio with Ian Payne on Friday morning, and she had a great chance to talk about these stats and the importance of Herbie's Law in changing this in the future. So if you haven't already, please do contact your MP about Herbie's Law and about these stats. And you can do that using the tool that's on our website. But we've already had an unbelievable response thanks to our incredible supporters. It's amazing to see. And actually over 79% of all the 650 MPs have been contacted already, at least once.
That's
so
amazing.
Some of them have been contacted 7 or 8 times by different people in their constituencies. So it's amazing that's happened even in just a few days. So thank you to everyone that's done that already.
Yeah, really important. Thank you so much, everybody. I mean, I think it translates to something like 500 and almost 550 MPs or something have been already contacted over the weekend, which is incredible. And we know how powerful that is. Our public affairs team tell us time and time again that MPs are getting in touch with us because they've heard from our supporters directly. So, thank you so
really
much.
Does work. So if you haven't done it already and you would like to contact your MP, we've made it really easy. All you have to do is go on our website and find the tool, and all you've got to do is put in your postcodes and it'll pull up your MP's details, and there's a pre-written message with all these figures about the stats and Herbie's Law, telling them enough is enough. We need to see a change. We're aiming to reach every single MP. So
that would be good, wouldn't it? Yeah, we really we really want to keep the pressure on while we're waiting for the government to publish its strategy, because every time an MP is contacted, they then go and talk to a minister that can make a difference in the strategy. So it's really important that we keep the pressure up. So thank you so much, everybody, for doing that.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you. So there really is a lot more information that I could pull out of these statistics. We could talk about it all day, but I know it's a lot of numbers and it's hard to kind of listen to, and we are limited for time. So please do, like Carla said, have a look at our website. There's a whole page dedicated to the statistics, and there's also other pages on the laws around animal testing, and we debunk some of the myths and things like that. So, do have a look, because when the numbers are this big and you're talking about thousands or millions of animals, it's really difficult to remember every single one of these numbers is a living, sentient being that feels fear and pain just in the same way that we do. And, they really are no different to an animal that you might keep as a pet or see in the wild. So it really brings it home that this 1.2% decrease just really isn't good enough.
And that's why Herbie's Law is called Herbie's Law,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
Herbie stands as a symbol for, an animal who's so loved, but
Yeah.
who started out in a place like this. And he is no different. He was no
Exactly.
different from the animals who are being used. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much to everybody for standing with us and for standing with the animals, even more importantly, and
Yeah.
helping us to get the message out there, because we really couldn't do it without you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now it's time to think about Breast Cancer Awareness Month. That's October. So we have the wonderful Dr. Jenny Ashworth of the University of Nottingham joining us. She's a breast cancer researcher, and she's going to tell us all about her work. So yeah, really happy that you're here. Thank you, Jenny, for joining us.
No, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Hi, Jenny. Welcome. So tell us a little bit about your work.
Okay, great. So in my lab, we're interested in the surroundings of the cells in the body. So the cells in our bodies are not alone. They're surrounded by complex networks of proteins and sugars and other molecules. And these networks, they affect how cells behave and interact with each other. And so what we do in my lab is try to recreate those surroundings as closely as possible. So for this project, we're interested in recreating the protein networks that surround the cells in breast tissue. So that includes mimicking changes in stiffness that we see during breast cancer. So also the changes in molecular or chemical composition that we see surrounding the cells. And so using artificial animal-free ways to do this so that we can understand a bit more about how those surroundings influence how cells behave in the body.
So why is that important, Jenny?
So the more we understand about how cells behave in the body, particularly during the progression and development of diseases like breast cancer, the easier it is for us to find treatments. And the approach that we use of looking at the surroundings of the cells and not just the cells is really important, because we know that there is an interaction and a communication between the cells and their surroundings. But at the moment, what we don't really know is how to use that to our advantage in terms of giving patients the best possible treatment. So if we can identify what it is about the cell surroundings that might cause or influence the first stages of breast cancer development, it's more likely that we'll be able to identify or design a new treatment that might be able to just stop that process and help treat the cancer before it gets too serious.
So you're growing your cells in 3D, aren't you? So we call them organoids, kind of complex cell culture methods. But to grow cells in that way, you have to support the cells in a slightly different way as you would if you were growing them on a flat surface, don't you? But a lot of those products that are used usually come from animals, don't they? So tell us about how you're working to replace all the animal products in your work.
Yes, so usually organoids, so these complex tissue mimetic clusters of cells, they're grown in animal-derived products, and these are usually derived from mice. And so there are two problems with this. So one is that every mouse is different, just like every human is different. So if you use the complex cocktail of proteins that comes from a mouse, it's going to be different every time. And so in terms of scientific reproducibility, that means it's very difficult sometimes to really understand what's happening in your experiment and to really rely on your results. So that's one problem. And then the other problem is that a mouse is not a human. So if you're trying to recreate the surroundings of the cells, which we know are very important in influencing both how the healthy tissue functions, but also what happens during disease, we really need to make something as human as possible. And so what we do in my lab is we use artificial substances called hydrogels. So it's like a jelly type substance. And what's really nice about these is we can tune the stiffness and we can tune the chemical makeup of these hydrogels to get as close as possible to what we would see in an actual human breast.
That's so fascinating, Jenny, and so important to be using, human cells. Where do you get those from? Where do you get your patient samples from?
We work with the Breast Cancer Now Tissue Bank, which is an organisation that's linked to Queen Mary University of London. And so they organise speaking to the patients and collecting the samples, so with full consent and with understanding of the patients to what their samples and cells are going to be used for. And so they take very good care of these samples, and they communicate with us as researchers to give us the samples that we need for our research. And they're also really good at supporting us and helping us with the right protocols and methods to get the best possible results out of them as well.
That's really important. And why is it something that needs to be done to study samples that come from different people? Do you see a lot of variability between the different samples?
There can be. So everybody is different, and it's a complicated problem because even the cells within one person will have variability. And so when we start comparing different patients, there will be lots of variability as well. So to get the most reliable results and understand really what's happening between the cells and how they're interacting, we need to do lots of repeats of our experiments. And so that involves studying different samples from different patients. And I guess another point is that we primarily use samples from patients who have had a breast reduction surgery, and that might be for many reasons. So it might be for cosmetic reasons, but it might also be a risk reduction surgery, for example, if they have a family history of a mutation such as BRCA. And so it's that also by looking at different patient samples, we can start to understand if there are differences between those different types of samples as well.
Mm. Yeah, and like you say, there's so much variability between different patients there. So if you were trying to do this work using an animal, you're kind of bringing in an extra level of differences that you could potentially see, and it's going to make things a lot harder to get to the real kind of what's happening in this breast cancer and work to get treatments for it, isn't it? So what kind of animals research would your work replace in the kind of wider scheme of cancer research?
I guess so. There's two areas in which we're hoping to replace animal research. And one is in replacing the use of mouse models of cancer, and one is in replacing the use of animal-derived materials, so substances that we use to grow the cells. So both of those different areas is quite although my current work is on breast tissue, there's potential for my methods to be used for lots of different types of organs and diseases. It's all based on analysing what's present in human tissue and recreating that using artificial synthetic materials rather than using things that are derived from an animal.
Yeah, that's really important to make it completely human specific. So how did you get into this area? Sort of what interested you about, developing these materials to replace these animal products?
Well, so my degree was in material science, so
Mm.
that involved studying everything from steels to ceramics to my favorite
Wow.
topic, which was biomaterials. And
Mm.
so I got really interested in some of the topics that we studied, where we were looking at natural materials, so things like spider silk and wood, and how the way they're almost designed is just so clever, and they have these really amazing properties. And so I became interested in how scientists can recreate those properties so they can be inspired by nature and recreate these kinds of smart materials for all sorts of different applications. And I became particularly interested in how we can use biological materials or bio-inspired materials as a way of growing cells in the lab, because it's something that's it's really exciting because it does get a lot closer to what's happening in the body than the typical way of growing cells in the lab is to grow them on a sheet of plastic effectively. And obviously that there's not really any plastic of that type in your body, so it's not very realistic. So if we can
Yeah.
use these smart materials to recreate the surroundings of the cells, it's got really exciting future for medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many elements of nature that we can draw on because there's so many things that exist in nature that we would never have even come up with. So yeah, that's so interesting. And why is animal-free research in general important to you?
Well, it's important for such a huge number of reasons. I feel that as scientists, we have a responsibility to both to be as ethical as possible, but also to be as scientifically rigorous as possible. So using animals is problematic for so many reasons, both in terms of the ethics, but also in terms of the results that you see are not going to be necessarily representative of how a human patient would respond. So it's just so important to replace methods that are currently being used using animal technologies with something that's a lot more realistic. to the patient, because it saves human lives as well as animal lives.
Jenny, that's so fascinating. I'd just love to talk with you for hours about your material sciences degree and spider webs and so cool. but you've chosen to like specialize down into this really really important area that's going to make a real difference, I hope. So where do you see this going? What impact do you think you could be having for patients, because breast cancer, it's a huge problem?
Yeah, so there's a few different areas in which it can help patients in the future. So one is simply by understanding more about how the cancer develops, that will help us develop new therapies. But in the future, I'd hope that there'd be even more exciting opportunities where, because these methods are very scalable, so by making a miniature version of a tumor in the lab, we can make lots and lots of them. And that would mean that we can test lots of different drugs and drug combinations, and this would help us predict which might be the most effective in a patient. And the dream would be that one day this could even be used for personalised medicine, where we could potentially grow tumours or pieces of tissue and scale this up for one particular patient. And then we could use that to help design a personalised treatment for that person. And we're a bit of a way away from that now, but it's good to be excited about the future possibilities of where this technology could lead.
So cool. Definitely the direction it's heading. Do you have a sense of how long we are from that?
It's really hard to say. So I think, the first step would be identifying ways to create more treatments. So that would be a few years. But then, in the future, who knows? And especially as techniques for growing the cells become better, combined with my methods for recreating their surroundings, hopefully everything will converge and come together. And you never know, it's hard to put a timescale on this kind of thing, but it could completely change the way that patients are treated in the clinic.
Yeah, and things are moving at pace, aren't they? They're moving so much faster, just across the board. So I'm going to say within our lifetime, Jenny, this is going to happen.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I'm not a scientist, so I'm less cautious than you guys. So let's say that. So, Jenny, thank you so much for joining us. It's been so fascinating to hear about your amazing work, and really gives us hope for the future. Before we let you go, have you got a message for people listening at home and for our supporters?
Yeah, sure. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's donated and who will be donating, and please keep on donating, because it's so important to encourage the scientific community to take up these animal-free methods for research, and just transform the way we do science to become much more human relevant, and just save animal and human lives. It's just so great to be part of this journey.
Brilliant. It's just win-win, as I always like to say. So it's a win for science, it's a win for animals, it's a win for patients as well. So
definitely.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for being part of it. And thank you for being so inspiring.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Jenny. Lovely to see you.
Well, that's all we have time for today, but we'll be back in a fortnight where we'll bring you all the latest from the heart of animal-free research. But before we go, Gemma, tell us this week's poll question.
Yeah, so thinking about Jenny's work there, the question is, does research into personalised medicine make you feel more hopeful about the future of breast cancer treatment? Yes or no? So as always, you can vote on X, LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram, and we'll discuss the results in the next episode. But if you'd like to get in touch and tell us your thoughts about the animal statistics or anything else in this episode, please do drop us an email at hello@animalfreeresearchuk.org.
And just say the poll question one more time.
Yeah, it's, does research into personalised medicine make you feel more hopeful about the future of breast cancer treatment? Yes or no?
Brilliant. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Dr. Gemma, for being here and telling us all about the stats. And
no problem.
We'll see you in a fortnight.
Yeah. See you soon. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.